everyone, I hope you're really well. Welcome, or indeed welcome back to the channel. If you are new, don't forget to hit subscribe because today it's time for another foundation update, specifically on these foundations. So as you probably know, I love foundation testing. I'm constantly on the hunt for like the perfect holy grail foundation, and a few have come pretty close. I do have a couple of kind of holy grail foundations that I'll use dependent on what the weather's doing, but I kind of feel like the quest is still on to kind of find the ultimate of ultimate foundations. If you don't know much about me and my skin and how I generally do foundation test videos, pretty much all of my foundation tests are first impressions, so they're my raw feelings on the product the first time I use it. I don't use primer or setting powder, I just like to see how the foundation performs on its own, and then I do a follow-up video, which is this one, where I talk a little bit about how I've got on, experimenting with it a bit more, using different primers, using a setting powder, and just let you know what my final thoughts are really. I do still like doing the first impression videos because not everyone owns the same products that I do in terms of setting powder or primer, so I think there is still a place for having that first impression video. But I then want to do the update with you guys in terms of how I've got on, having a bit of an experiment really. So this is actually the last time you'll see a video in this kind of format in terms of me doing more than one foundation, because I did a very quick kind of straw poll on a previous video, and the general consensus seems to be that you guys would prefer sort of standalone videos. So I'll do my first impressions video on that foundation, and then probably a couple of weeks later I'll do you an update just specifically on that foundation once I've had a chance to have a really good play around with it. So I would imagine that those videos will be a fair bit shorter than these videos tend to be, but I do still want to provide quite a lot of information in those update videos as well. So I'm just going to have to see how it goes, I think. But I wanted to try and catch up a bit, so I am going to do 5 different foundations today, but I will try and get through them as quick as possible. I think the first video that you will see, where it's a standalone update in terms of foundation, will be the ordinary foundations, and I may as well do both at the same time, so that will be the serum and the coverage foundation. In terms of how I further tested these foundations out after my first impressions, I've tried a few different application methods. The Zoeva 104 and my L'Oreal Professional Makeup Sponge I used in my first impressions video anyway, and I've also got my Pure Cosmetics foundation paddle brush thingy as well. And of course I've got my fingers as well, which I'll use for application too, just to see if fingers work better than anything else. And lastly, in terms of products that I used underneath and on top of each of these foundations, just to see if it improved wear time and look and feel and all that kind of stuff, I've got a whole host of primers here that I tried, and I've also got my NARS Translucent Crystal Setting Powder. This is the only setting powder that I've got at the moment, so this is the only powder that I use to test it. But in terms of primers, we have Tarte Clean Slate Poreless, Hourglass Mineral Veil, Guerlain Meteorites Pearls. Thank you to everyone for the recommendation of this one, which is the Hylamide Matte 12, because this gets raved about a lot. And then finally, to finish up the primers, I've got the Ordinary High Spreadability and the Ordinary High Adherence. So as you can probably gather, there has been a lot of experimentation. So enough of the upfront information, let's get into how I got on with each of these foundations. The first one that I want to talk about is Estee Lauder Double Wear. I should have actually included this in my last update video, but somehow I managed to miss it off the list, so I've included it in this one instead. But I think I originally tested this back in October, so it was quite a while ago now. I tried Double Wear a long time ago, but a lot of people were saying you need to try it again, and I thought because my knowledge on makeup has improved quite a lot since the first time I tried it, I did actually want to try it again, because I knew it was one of those ones that you had to work with quite quickly, and it could be pretty unforgiving if you weren't using it correctly. So I happened to be in a department store one day, and I went up to the Estee Lauder counter. They matched me with this shade, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. I think it's Cool Vanilla, and it looks very yellow. I don't think it was quite the right shade for me. I would like to go back and maybe go to a different counter and get rematched, because I think there were a lot of lights in play and it wasn't really showing my skin tone correctly. Although this was one of the new shades that they actually brought out, I think it was last year sometime, and I was quite excited about trying this shade because I thought it was going to be a good match for me. But the fact that it's called Cool Vanilla is a bit of a confusing thing because usually cool and vanilla don't really go together when it comes to a shade, but it did turn out to be a little bit too yellow for me. However, in terms of the actual foundation, I know that this is a holy grail foundation for many people with all sorts of different skin types, but particularly for people with skin type like what I have, which is quite oily. Now, like I said, this stuff is pretty unforgiving if you don't work with it quickly. So I quickly learnt that the best way to apply it is to just build up in very light layers, and you need to work quickly because of the fact that it does dry down quite fast, but obviously if you're applying light layers it's going to dry down even quicker. Now, every day that I've used this, and I've still got a little bit left, I wanted to save a bit for the swatch that I needed to do, but I think in these size samples you usually get about 10 applications out of it, and of all the times that I've used this I wasn't getting application perfect every single time, and I think that's why some people do disregard this quite quickly, because there is a learning curve with this. But I think once you get to the point that you're confident with it and you're comfortable with what you're doing, this is pretty blooming amazing. Even without primer, it works fantastically on its own, just on top of your moisturiser. But with primer, and pretty much any of the primers that I've just shown you, it works really beautifully, just to make it go onto the skin a little bit easier, blend a little bit more forgiving, and of course increase the longevity of what is actually already a very long wearing foundation. So I would definitely like to further experiment with this. It's a shame it was just, albeit a quite generous sample, but I would like to get maybe another sample in a shade that I feel matches me a little bit better, and then really have a lot of fun with it. So the jury isn't completely out on this one yet. I do feel like I need to pick up another sample, but so far I've actually really enjoyed this on the days that I've got it right, because like I said, sometimes it can be very unforgiving very fast. Like if it's dried down too much and you try and keep blending it, it's not good. So there's definitely a learning curve, and I have found that the times that this has gone on really nicely is the days where I haven't waited too long for my moisturiser to sink in. So it is going onto skin that is maybe slightly damp still, it just makes it go on that bit better. So further experimentation is required, but I am excited about this one. Next up, I tested this foundation from Becca, and it was the Perfect Skin Mineral Powder Foundation. Now, I believe this has been discontinued. I did pick it up in the sale from Space NK, I think it was around January time, so apologies if you're trying to get your hands on this, but I'm not sure if it's all that readily available anymore. But this was essentially my first venture into mineral powder foundation, and I've always wanted to try it, but I just didn't quite know where to start. So when this popped up as being half price in the sale, I thought, right, now is the time to try it. I picked it up in the shade Porcelain, which is generally a good match for me. When I retested it again the other day, it is a little bit light on me, so I had to warm it up a bit with bronzer. But no matter what I do with this in terms of primer underneath it, it goes unbelievably oily, glossy, luminous, whatever term you want to put on it, it's not good. And it's literally a case of wherever you put this product, you're going to go shiny. So I even go shiny in areas that I generally don't when I use any other foundations. So there's obviously something to this foundation which just promotes the creation of oil or something, because it's like after a couple of hours of wearing this, my face has just gone, oh my goodness, and just sent all of my oils out of my face, all over my face at the same time. It's really strange, and there's nothing that I can do about it. Even on initial application, it's already got that kind of glow to it, which when I did my first impressions video, I was very nervous of, and obviously that was rightly so. But nothing has really changed since that first impressions video. I think it is just one of those foundations that's just never going to work for me, unfortunately. I've heard that some people really love it and are really disappointed that it's been discontinued, but I can't honestly say I'm one of those people, so I'm not quite sure what to do with this. I'm going to have a think about it. Plus, the coverage isn't fantastic. It does take a while to build up, and I get to a point where I think I just can't physically put any more powder on my face. And I think because of the fact that I do have to use this quite heavy-handed in order to get the level of coverage that I want, and we're not talking about anything crazy here, we're just talking about evening stuff out, I think that doesn't help in terms of whatever is in here that makes my oils just kind of erupt and go absolutely crazy. So can't really recommend this one for oily skin, but it's not like you can get it anyway by the sounds of it. Next, I tried this foundation from L'Oreal, and it's their Infallible Total Cover, and I picked it up in the shade Porcelain. Even though I'm vanilla, generally speaking, with Infallible Matte, I felt like there was a bit of a shade difference because the step up from this was way too dark for me. Unfortunately, most of the time this is too pale for me, so I walk around looking quite washed out, particularly at the moment. I am not a fan of this one. I know that quite a few people are, and when L'Oreal first brought it out, the whole of the beauty community kind of went a little bit crazy. There were so many reviews, people loving it. It's not that great. I would definitely choose L'Oreal Infallible Matte over and above this one if you have oily skin. I find that Infallible Matte is far more forgiving. It gives a really nice level of coverage pretty quickly, whereas this can be a pain in the bum to work with. I find that it does settle into pores quite a lot, particularly around my temples, and again, that's kind of regardless of what primer I've used. It is quite tricky to blend into the skin because of the fact that it is quite a stiff formula, so I don't tend to reach for this one that often because I know that it's going to be quite a faff to put on, and I have foundations that I prefer over and above this one. In terms of application, I find that sponge is definitely the way to go. This is actually a L'Oreal sponge which I picked up to replace my dead beauty blender, and actually I've been really enjoying using this. You'll have seen this in probably quite a lot of my get ready with me's or my foundation test videos, so I've been really enjoying this, and it is the way to go in terms of applying this, but I just don't really like this foundation, unfortunately. It says it's supposed to have quite a lightweight feel and give you full coverage with a matte finish, and I haven't really found many of those things to be true at all, actually. In terms of it being lightweight, it can be to a point, but then you're not getting a huge amount of coverage, so you do need to build it up quite a bit. And in terms of a matte finish, I'm not sure if I could really agree with that either. I literally just tested it out yesterday just to make sure I was happy with what I was going to say to you guys about it, and it felt quite sticky and tacky on my skin, and that was after setting it as well. And then as the day went on, I just became shinier and shinier, and I found that generally it just fights most primers that I've tried with this. There are a couple that work. I found that the Hourglass Mineral Veil works really well, but that primer is blimmin' expensive, and I like to try and get away without having to reach that primer if I can help it because it is so expensive. But that is my last resort primer because it does work so well with oily skin. But don't like this, don't really like how it feels, how it looks, how difficult it is to use, so I wouldn't pick this one up again. I would definitely pick up Infallible Matte over and above this, but then I'd probably choose that foundation over and above lots of others too. Next up, I have a foundation that I can actually rave about. It sits very happily in my current rotation along with one or two other foundations, and it is this one from IT Cosmetics, and it's Your Skin But Better CC Plus Cream. And I love this stuff. It's amazing. This is still the original tube from my first impressions video, and I've probably used about half, I think, and this does get quite a lot of action. I think in my first impressions video I ended up using a pump for each side of my face, which is definitely way too much. A pump quite happily does my whole face. There are so many things that I love about this CC cream, and one of the biggest things is the fact that it comes with a very high physical SPF. It's actually 50, so if it's a really hot day and I can't really be bothered with wearing too much makeup but I still want my skin to look really nice, this is my go-to. And in the UK this week we've just finished having a ridiculous heat wave, which apparently was pretty much as bad as the last one we had 40 years ago, and on those ridiculously hot days it was this that I was reaching for because it gives a really beautiful and very natural looking level of coverage, but of course you're getting an amazingly good SPF in here too. I originally picked this up as part of a pack from QVC. They had it as a special value thing a little while ago, and it came with the brush that you're supposed to use to apply this. it was rubbish. In my first impressions video, I did try and use it, but I just felt like it just wasn't happening at all. I have tried it with brushes and sponges, but honestly the best way to apply this is with your fingers, because it does just feel like you're applying a really nice moisturiser to your skin, which just happens to have all the other skin loving stuff in it too, including the fantastic level of SPF. So I absolutely love this stuff. Unfortunately, as far as I'm aware, in the UK we can only pick it up from QVC, and the lighter shades are pretty much constantly out of stock, which is super frustrating. I have mine in the shade Light, which is a lot darker than you would expect it to be, and hopefully that will show up pretty well on the swatch. I can pretty much get away with it most of the year round, but I could probably do with picking up the lightest shade of the lot, which I think was called Fair. I've recommended this stuff to so many people because it's so nice to be able to pick something up that's very quick and easy to apply, looks beautiful on the skin. It just makes you look like you have lovely, lovely skin. It's got lots of fantastic skin loving stuff in it, and it smells a bit like lemon curd or lemon meringue pie or something like that. So there's just nothing not to like about this. I've just got one last foundation to talk about now, and this was one of these kind of YouTube beauty blogger hyped products that when a few people started doing reviews on it, it exploded. But this product has been around for a really, really long time, and it is this product here. It's the Dermacol Makeup Cover. I picked up two shades. I've got 208 and 210, because trying to figure out your shade in this stuff is really quite tricky. I had to do a lot of research on swatches, I had to watch a lot of videos, and actually 210 worked out to be a really quite good match for me. 208 is a little bit too pale, but come the winter time I'll be able to mix them together and be able to create my custom blend foundation. Where do I start with this stuff? It's the strangest thing I have ever put on my face. The packaging makes it look like it should belong somewhere in old Hollywood or something. It's got that kind of nostalgic look to it, which I personally really like. It kind of makes you look as though, well, it's been around for a long time, I should put my trust in it. You need to tread very carefully with this stuff. They don't call it extreme cover for nothing. I do actually have it on my face today in the 210 shade, but it's not one that I tend to reach for all that often, and there are a few different reasons for that. I think it can look absolutely gorgeous. It can give you a really beautiful and very natural looking level of coverage, provided you have an extremely light hand with it, because the tiniest amount goes a really long way, and you will have to trust me on that one, because in the first impressions video I definitely used way too much. The way that I actually generally like to use this is to use a really small amount and mix it in with my moisturiser, and it's thank you very much to one of you guys for suggesting that. It was Lorraine who commented on my review of this to say that it does actually mix in really nice with things, and you know what, it really does. It was a lot of fun experimenting, mixing it with other things, whether it's my moisturiser or perhaps other foundations as well, just to amp up the coverage of whatever that foundation is. So it was a lot of fun experimenting with this one, and I found that actually, provided you use the right amount, it doesn't actually tend to go too oily either. Obviously primers do help with that as well, and most of the primers that I've got have worked with it really nicely too. But the key with this one really is to make sure that you don't use too much, because provided you don't use too much, it will dry down and give you a nice kind of skin-like finish that isn't really matte but just feels very comfortable, and you'd be surprised what little you can get away with using. It's amazing. So I'll probably still have these in I don't even know how long's time. The only other thing that makes me a little bit nervous about the Dermacol makeup cover is the fact that it's not really meant to be used on a daily basis, and I've heard that it's broken people out before as well. So like I said, you do need to tread quite carefully with it, but it's so amazingly affordable. It's also a lot of fun to experiment with, and I've seen lots of really cool videos and pictures of people using it to cover tattoos as well. So lots of fun can be had with this. It can be applied really beautifully with any of the tools that I mentioned earlier on. One of my personal favourite application methods is to actually use this paddle brush, and what I do is I pop some on the back of my hand, a really small amount, and then I kind of work it into the paddle brush and really buff it in, so that when I'm applying it to my face, and that's how I've applied it today, it's not applying too much. So when you apply it correctly, it can actually go on super quickly, particularly with a brush like this, and it can actually look really nicely natural and last a really long time too. So I do still pick this one up from time to time, but it's not one that I'm particularly drawn to because personally I have other foundations that I just prefer over and above it. So that is it for today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. As I said at the beginning of the video, this is the last time that I'll be doing a foundation update this way. The next time you see a foundation update, it will be on the ordinary foundations, and I'll just purely be talking about those. So this is the last time that I'll be doing several different foundations in one video. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video anyway. If you did, I would really appreciate a thumbs up down below because it does really help support my channel. And if you are new and would like to subscribe to see more content like this from me in the future, I will pop a button just here so you can click it and get notified of new content as and when it gets uploaded. And if you've not seen my last video, I will pop a link to that one just up here so you can click it and check that one out too. Anyway, I hope you're all really well and I will see you again soon. Bye!